Then you'll find another, fidgety, fretty, won't move the right way, or starts across a stall, tosses up his head as soon as you come near him, lays his ears back, and seems afraid of you, or else squares about at you with his heels. Poor things. I know what sort of treatment they have had. If they are timid, it makes them start or shy. If they're high-mettled, it makes them vicious or dangerous. Their tempers are mostly made when they are young. Bless you, they are like children. Train them up in the way they should go, as the good book says, and when they are old they will not depart from it. If they have a chance, that is. I like to hear you talk, said James. That's the way we lay it down at home at my master's. Who is your master, young man? If it be a proper question, I should judge he is a good one, from what I see. He is Squire Gordon, of Birtwick Park, the other side of Beacon Hills, said James. Ah, so. I've heard tell of him, yeah. Fine judge of horses, ain't he? The best rider in the county. I believe he is, said James. But he rides very little now, since the poor young master was killed. Ah, poor gentleman. I read all about it in the paper at the time. A fine horse killed too, wasn't there? Yes, said James. He was a splendid creature. Brother to this one, and just like him. Pity, said the old man. 'Twas a bad place to leap, if I remember. A thin fence at top, a steep bank down to the stream, wasn't it? No chance for a horse to see where he was going. Now, I'm for bold riding as much as any man, but still, there are some leaps that only a very knowing old huntsman has any right to take. A man's life and a horse's life are worth far more than a fox's tail. At least, I should say they ought to be. During this time, the other man had finished ginger and brought our corn, and James and the old man left the stable together. Later on in the evening, a traveller's horse was brought in by the second hostler, and while he was cleaning him, a young man with a pipe in his mouth lounged into the stable to gossip. "I say, Towler," said the hostler, "just run up the ladder into the loft and put some hay down to this horse's rack, will you? Only lay down your pipe." "All right," said the other, and went up through the trap-door, and I heard him step across the floor overhead and put down the hay. James came in to look at us the last thing, and then the door was locked. I cannot say how long I had slept, nor what time in the night it was. But I woke up very uncomfortable, though I hardly knew why. I got up. The air seemed thick and choking. I heard Ginger coughing, and one of the other horses moved about restlessly. It was dark, quite dark, and I could see nothing. But the stable was full of smoke, and I hardly knew how to breathe. The trap-door had been left open, and I thought that was the place it came through. I listened, and heard a soft, rushing sort of noise and a low crackling and snapping. I did not know what it was, but there was something in the sound so strange that it made me tremble all over. The other horses were now all awake. Some were pulling at their halters, others were stamping. At last, I heard steps outside, and the hostler who had put up the traveller's horse burst into the stable with a lantern and began to untie the horses and to lead them out. But he seemed in such a hurry and so frightened himself that he frightened me still more. The first horse would not go with him. He tried the second and the third. They too would not stir. He came to me next and tried to drag me out of the stall by force. Of course there was no use. He tried us all by turns and then left the stable. No doubt we were very foolish. But danger seemed to be all around, and there was nobody we knew to trust in, and all was strange and uncertain. The fresh air that had come in through the open door made it easier to breathe, but the rushing sound overhead grew louder, and as I looked upward through the bars of my empty rack, I saw a red light flickering on the wall. Then I heard a cry of "Fire!" outside, and the old hostler quietly and quickly came in. He got one horse out and went to another, but the flames were playing around the trap-door, and the roaring overhead was dreadful. The next I heard was James's voice, quiet and cheery as it always was. "Come, my beauties, it is time for us to be off, so wake up and come along. I stood nearest the door, so he came to me first, patting me as he came. "Come, Beauty, on with your bridle, my boy. We'll soon be out of this smother." It was on in no time. Then he took the scarf off his neck and tied it lightly over my eyes, and patting and coaxing, he led me out of the stable, safe into the yard. He slipped the scarf off my eyes and shouted, "Here, somebody, take this horse while I go back for the other." A tall, broad man stepped forward and took me, and James started back into the stable. I set up a shrill whinny as I saw him go. Ginger told me afterwards that whinny was the best thing I could have done for her, for had she not heard me outside, she would never have had the courage to come out. There was much confusion in the yard, the horses being got out of their stables, and the carriages and gigs being pulled out of the houses and sheds lest the flames should spread further. On the other side of the yard, windows were thrown up, and people were shouting all sorts of things, but I kept my eye fixed on the stable door, where the smoke poured out thicker than ever, and I could see flashes of red light. Presently I heard above all the stir and din and loud, clear voice, which I knew was Master's. "James Howard! James Howard! Are you there?" There was no answer, but I heard a crash of something falling in the stable. The next moment I gave a loud, joyful neigh, for I saw James coming through the smoke, leading Ginger with him. She was coughing violently, and he was not able to speak. "My brave lad," said the master, laying his hand on his shoulder. "Are you hurt?" James shook his head, for he could not speak. "Ay," said the big man who held me, "he is a brave lad, and no mistake." "And now," said Master, "when you've got your breath, James, we'll get out of this place as quickly as we can." And we were moving towards the entry, when from the marketplace there came a sound of galloping feet and loud rumbling wheels. "'Tis a fire engine! 'Tis a fire engine!" shouted two or three voices. "Stand back! Make way!" And clattering and thundering over the stones, two horses dashed into the yard with a heavy engine behind them. The firemen leaped to the ground, and there was no need to ask where the fire was. It was torching up the great blaze from the roof. We got out as fast as we could into the broad, quiet marketplace. The stars were shining, and except for the noise behind us, all was still. Master led the way to a large hotel on the other side, and as soon as the hostlers came, he said, "James, I must now hasten to your mistress. I trust the horses entirely to you. Order whatever you think is needed." And with that, he was gone. The master did not run, but I never saw mortal man walk so fast as he did that night. There was a dreadful sound before we got into our stalls, the shrieks of those poor horses that were left burning to death in the stable. It was terrible, and made both Ginger and me feel very bad. We, however, were taken in and well done by. The next morning, the master came to see how we were and to speak to James. I did not hear much, for the hostler was rubbing me down, but I could see that James looked very happy, and I thought the master was proud of him. Our mistress had been so much alarmed in the night that the journey was put off till the afternoon, so James had the morning on hand, and went first to the inn to see about our harness and the carriage, and then to hear more about the fire. When he came back, we heard him tell the hostler about it. At first, no one could guess how the fire had been caused, but at last a man said he saw Dick Towler go into the stable with a pipe in his mouth, and when he came out, he had not one, and went to the tap for another. Then the under-hostler said that he had asked Dick to go up the ladder to put down some hay, but told him to lay down his pipe first. Dick denied taking the pipe with him, but no one believed him. I remember our John Manley's rule, never to allow a pipe in the stable, and thought it ought to be the rule everywhere. James said the roof and the floor had fallen in, and that only the black walls were standing. The two poor horses that could not be got out were buried under the burned rafters and tiles. The rest of our journey was very easy. A little after sunset we reached the house of my master's friend. We were taken into a clean, snug stable. There was a kind coachman, who made us very comfortable, and who seemed to think a good deal of James when he heard about the fire. "There's one thing quite clear, young man," he said. "Your horses know who they can trust. It is one of the hardest things in the world to get horses out of a stable when there's either fire or flood. I don't know why they won't come out, but they won't, not 1 in 20. We stopped 2 or 3 days at this place and then returned home. All went well on the journey. We were glad to be back in our own stable again, and John was equally glad to see us. Before he and James left us for the night, James said, "I wonder who is coming in my place." "Little Joe Green at the lodge," said John. "Little Joe Green? Why, he's a child." "He's 14 and a half," said John. "But he's such a little chap." "Yes, he is small, but he is quick and willing and kind-hearted too. And then he wishes very much to come, and his father would like it, and I know the master would like to give him the chance. He said if I thought he would not do, he would look out for a bigger boy, but I said I was quite agreeable to try him for 6 weeks. 6 weeks, said James. Why, it will be 6 months before he can be of much use. It will make you a great deal of work, John. Well, said John with a laugh, work and I are very good friends. I never was afraid of work yet. You are a very good man, said James. I wish I may ever be like you. I don't often speak of myself, said John, but as you are going away from us into the world and to shift for yourself, I'll just tell you how I look on these things. I was just as old as Joseph when my father and mother died of the fever, within 10 days of each other, and left me and my crippled sister Nellie alone in the world, without a relation that we could look to for help. I was a farmer's boy, not earning enough to keep myself, much less both of us. And she must have gone to the workhouse but for our mistress. Nellie calls her her angel, and she has good right to do so. She went and hired a room for her with old widow Mallet, and gave her knitting and needlework when she was able to do it. And when she was ill, she sent her dinners and made nice, comfortable things for her, and was like a mother to her. Then the master took me into the stable under old Norman, the coachman that was then. I had my food at the house, and my bed in the loft, and a suit of clothes, and 3 shillings a week, so that I could help Nellie. Then there was Norman. He might have turned around and said that at his age he could not be troubled with a raw boy from the plough-tail, but he was like a father to me, and took no end of pains with me. When the old man died some years later, I stepped into his place. And now, of course, I have top wages, and can lay by for a rainy day or a sunny day, as it may happen, and Nellie is as happy as a bird. So you see, James, I'm not the man that should turn up his nose at a little boy and vex a good, kind master. No, no, I shall miss you very much, James, but we shall pull through, and there's nothing like doing a kindness when 'tis put in your way, and I am glad I can do it. Then, said James, you don't hold with that saying, everybody look after himself and take care of number one. No, indeed, said John. Where should I and Nellie have been if master and mistress and old Norman had only taken care of number one? Why, she in the workhouse and I hoeing turnips. Where would Black Beauty and Ginger have been if you had only thought of number one? Why, roasted to death. No, Jim, no. That is a selfish, heathenish saying. Whoever uses it, and any man who thinks he has nothing to do but take care of number one, why, it's a pity. But what he had been drowned like a puppy or a kitten before he got his eyes open, that's what I think, said John with a very decided jerk of his head. James laughed at this, but there was a thickness in his voice when he said, You've been my best friend, except my mother. I hope you won't forget me. No, lad, no, said John. If I ever can do you a good turn, I hope you won't forget me. The next day Joe came to the stables to learn all he could before James left. He learned to sweep the stable, to bring in the straw and hay. He began to clean the harness and help to wash the carriage. As he was quite too short to do anything in the way of grooming Ginger and me, James taught him upon Merrylegs, for he was to have full charge of him under John. He was a nice, bright little fellow, and always came whistling to his work. Merrylegs was a good deal put out at being mauled about, as he said, by a boy who knew nothing. But towards the end of the second week he told me confidentially that he thought the boy would turn out well. At last the day came when James had to leave us. Cheerful as he was, he looked quite downhearted that morning. "You see," he said to John, "I'm leaving a good deal behind. My mother and Betsy and you and a good master and mistress, and then the horses and my old Merrylegs. At the new place there will be not a soul that I shall know. If it were not that I shall get a higher place and be able to help my mother better, I don't think I should have made up my mind to it. It's a real pinch, John." James, lad, so it is. But I should not think much of you if you could leave your home for the first time and not feel it. Cheer up. You'll make friends there, and if you get on well, as I'm sure you will, it'll be a fine thing for your mother, and she will be proud enough that you've got into such a good place as that. So John cheered him up, but everyone was sorry to lose James. As for Merrylegs, he pined after him for several days, and went quite off his appetite. So John took him out several mornings with a leading rein when he exercised me, and trotting and galloping by my side, got up the little fellow's spirits again, and soon he was all right. Joe's father would come often and give a little help, as he understood the work, and Joe took a great deal of pains to learn, and John was quite encouraged by him. One night, a few days after James had left, I had eaten my hay and was lying down in my straw fast asleep when I was suddenly roused by the stable bell ringing very loud. I heard the door of John's house open and his feet running up to the hall. He was back again in no time. He unlocked the stable door and came in, calling out, "Wake up, Beauty! You must go well now, if ever you did." And almost before I could think, he got the saddle on my back and a bridle on my head, and he just ran around for his coat and then took me at a quick trot up to the hall door. The squire stood there with a lamp in his hand. "Now, John," he said, "ride for your life, that is, for your mistress' life. There's not a moment to lose. Give this note to Dr. White. Give your horse a rest at the inn, and be back as soon as you can." John said, "Yes, sir," and was on my back in a minute. The gardener who lived at the lodge had heard the bell ring and was ready with the gate open, and we went on our way through the park and through the village and down the hill till we came to the toll gate. John called very loud and thumped upon the door, and the man was soon out and flung open the gate. "Now," said John, "do keep the gate open for the doctor. Here's the money." And off he went again. There was before us a long piece of level road by the riverside. John said to me, "Now, Beauty, do your best." And so I did. I wanted no whip nor spur, and for 2 miles I galloped as fast as I could lay my feet to the ground. I don't believe that my old grandfather, who won the race at Newmarket, could have gone faster. When we came to the bridge, John pulled me up a little and patted my neck. "Well done, Beauty, good old fellow," he said. He would have let me go slower, but my spirit was up, and I was off again as fast as before. The air was frosty, the moon was bright. It was very pleasant. We came through a village, then through a dark wood, then uphill, then downhill, till after an 8 miles run we came to town, through the streets and into the marketplace. It was all quiet, except the clatter of my feet on the stones. Everybody was asleep. The church clock struck 3 as we drew up to Dr. White's door. John rang the bell twice, and then knocked at the door like thunder. A window was thrown open. Dr. White, in his nightcap, put his head out and said, "What do you want?" "Mrs. Gordon is very ill, sir. Master wants you to go at once. He thinks she will die if you cannot get there. Here is a note." "Wait," he said, "I will come." He shut the window, and was soon at the door.